My husband is about 40 pounds heavier than the man I married. What motivates men to get in shape, and how can I help support him get healthy?
So did you marry someone else?
I'm curious. What do y'all have to say?
I wouldn't know anything about this.
Was it, wait, I'm sorry. Yeah, the question was, what motivates men to get in shape?
What motivates a 40-year-old dude, right, who's, been married for a while to get his shit together? To me, this is very simple, but it is also very complex.
You got to care about yourself, I would think.
Yeah, before I add my 2 cents to this, I'm just curious what you guys think. I mean, you guys work with clients and people that are challenged, males that are challenged at one point in their life. I think it's important to kind of talk about how they got there a little bit, just for a second, and then maybe answer it from there. But whenever you got married, again, like if you're, I don't know how long they say they were married for. She didn't. So if you're 40, if you're 40 and you're 40 pounds heavier, that doesn't happen overnight, right? That doesn't just happen. But it can happen quickly, depending on, some people are actually put in work to this. It seems like to me, like they're actually putting effort to being unhealthy at times. Very frustrating, but it doesn't just happen. So there's things that accumulate over time. And a lot of times that is just a lifestyle change. Things happen in life. You take on greater liability, the schedule changes, you have responsibilities that are much different than when you first got married. And a lot of that times, there's kids, right? And with the kids comes, again, that liability, but we need a bigger place to live. That costs more money, because we have to have bedrooms for these. And then we have daycare, we have sports, we have school, we have things, food, all the things that cut into that. And those are obvious factors of having children. Mm-hmm. That is,
for men and women.
Yeah, it doesn't matter which one, which side you lie on, and it's something you should be thinking about before you have kids. Like, again, I think there's some responsibility in doing that. I've heard people say, just have as many kids as you want, whatever.
Oh gosh.
Okay, well, what are your goals? Because if your goal is just to turn out some kids, you can do that. I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole here, but oftentimes the reason this happens is these things have come up and they just start to pile up and get out of control. But the question is like, what motivates them to lose weight? Like I said, I'm curious and get back in shape and take care of their health and prioritize it differently. I'm curious what your takes are.
Jim?
Well, I guess they have to consider themselves unhealthy. Right? Someone else, his wife's telling him, 40 pounds, it could probably push him off to working out, right? And they're asking what motivates a 40-year-old man to stay in shape. Well, does he have kids? Does he want to see his family? Does he want to stay around on the earth longer? I have multiple questions, but I mean, most men get their motivation from the opposite sex, staying healthy, being there for their kids at that age. How long have you guys been married? What does your shape look like? How is she in shape? Does she work out all the time and he doesn't?
Fair question.
I mean, I got a lot of questions, but for just a 40-year-old man that's out of shape, I would say that health and longevity would be the ultimate factor in that.
Yeah. Being able to be a provider for a long period of time. I mean, it really depends person to person. I mean, someone that I was speaking with today, a lot of his motivation was actually keeping up with his spouse, with his wife, because she's into active things. And he was, as I was kind of going through this exercise with him, getting to his deeper motivations, it seemed like he was worried about being left behind by her, and not being able to keep up with her in physically active things. And he feared his marriage. He feared them becoming distant because he couldn't keep up in the things that she likes to do. So it was boiled down to, we're now both retired. I am not in the physical shape that I would like to be to keep up with my wife on the things that she wants to do. So I mean, that could be a wake up call. I mean, I think a lot of men too, it might come down to pride. We talked about the guy who's like, I used to be a beast and now I'm weak. I think some men begin to get motivated by that. Like I used to be a stud. Now I'm washed up and beginning to feel like less virile, less powerful, weak.
Yeah.
Basically, I think that is a motivator for a lot of men.
That's great that you said that, because I got a client right now. The reason why he's back in is to keep up with his son who's running marathons, and he can't keep up with him. So the whole point of him coming back in is like, dude, like I just don't feel like I'm going to be there for my son and be able to do all these things. So yeah, there's multiple motivators, right?
Yeah.
It's going to be dependent.
The most recent one that I can think of is this client's wife actually was working out with Scott and I pretty regularly. So she was a client. Her husband was a top executive of a company around here, and he just retired. And when he retired, he was over fat. His A1C was, I think, almost off the chart. And at the time, he had 2 young children. And I think the motivating factor for him was, 1, his wife was concerned about his health. 2, he was concerned about his health because he had just been to the doctors. And then the other thing is he had time because he had retired. So I think for him, it was, finding a way that he could do something with his wife. And then also having structure, finding structure to get healthy again, to have regular exercise in his life. And then I think it was also, I never really asked him, but I'm guessing, just so he could be around for the family too.
That has to be in everyone's mind that's listening to this, that's older. I mean, and I've been through this personally. Your parents that don't take care of themselves and they pass away, they're not there to take care of the rest of the family, right? And the rest of the family takes on that burden. Whereas little simple things like drinking water and protein, like we've been talking about, can really change the life. And light exercise 2-3 times a week, right?
Huge difference.
So I think that's just anyone that's out there that's overage is thinking about, like, why do I need to get back in shape? Well, look at your family, like first and foremost, people around you, for yourself as well.
Yeah. So I think the motivation, the word motivation is a thing. And so is the wife asking about the husband. I think there can be some things you can do to influence that motivation, but it has to be internal.
Yeah. That's what,
At the end of the day, yes.
It's never going to come from her. He has to feel it.
And do not hound him about it, because
that's going to make it worse.
Yeah, it's not going to.
Dude has to come to his own realization here. And so I'll just put out my personal piece. And this is how, when we answer questions like this, I always sort of think about, all right, so I have sort of a responsibility here to be responsible in my response and not get too emotional or fired up, and also think about who's listening, people that do know me, people who don't know me. I have friends, I have family, and a lot of those people struggle with their weight or their health or their fitness or whatever else. But I will tell you this, I'm going to answer this in the way that I would ask it if I was at a family dinner table with my family and friends sitting around if I was asked that question, despite their current level of health, fitness, or whatever else. And I'm going to try to be as again, honest and sort of transparent as I can be, and try to be as understanding as I can be too. I'm just going to be very real about it. And that is this. As a man, your job is to provide and protect your family. That could be your kids, your wife, whoever that happens to be that's under your care. And I think intrinsically, that has to be a priority for you, and a number one. That will drive all of this stuff down the line, because it's a very simple premise to come back to. An easier way to think about this, if you're having a hard time wrapping your head around this, because people want to talk about gender roles and what's okay and what isn't. I'm not even going to go down that road. That's just where I am as a man. And I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, and I've done things to my body and things that are unhealthy because I lost track of that. I was chasing something else and not. And my foundation, I got away from my foundation of what I just said. And as a result, been divorced, and now I've had a second chance, with my daughter and with my new family. And my point of this is if you can't see that, if that doesn't resonate with you, then think about this. Think about this. Think about another man stepping in and doing the things that you should have been doing or could have been doing the entire time. But you chose other things, other behaviors, other choices, something easier so that you didn't have to do that. at that time. Now the consequences is you're gone and some other man has stepped in and he's having to be the provider because you couldn't do it. Now that goes down a whole line of things in terms of providing. That doesn't mean you have to do it all. And that's the importance of partnerships and understanding what the roles are within the relationship, despite whatever fucking gender you might be. All right. So again, that's not something I want to open up on this show today. But you mentioned something, and that is, you mentioned these examples and these experiences that we've had. As a wife, or as a spouse to this person, my assumption is that you care about this person, and that's why you're concerned. And I think it's really important that we have more honest conversations within our relationships, because we're not doing that in fucking society, right? We're not being honest at all. We're being about as fake as we can be, and we're very distracted about all the things that are going on. As a spouse, you have a duty, right, to have that open and very honest and transparent conversation with your spouse. So whether it's the, husband, wife, husband, whatever the case is, my thought is you're concerned, and you should express those concerns for whatever they are. And if you have a good relationship and you've done your part and you've really worked and kept the foundations of honoring your spouse or the foundation of honoring your spouse as the foundation for the relationship that you're in, then it shouldn't be hard. It might feel difficult because you don't want to hurt somebody's feelings or whatever, but you've got to have a conversation with them that they need to hear, not the one that they want to hear.
Yep.
And so I would step back before having that conversation and go, what have I not done? What could I have done better to be in a position to have this conversation, not feel so uncomfortable about having it? Like, I don't want to hurt his feelings. That is commendable. At the same time, what's the alternative? What's the consequence of not having this conversation? And first I would start with not how it impacts him, but how will it impact you? How will it impact you? What are the consequences of this? And I think part of it is being honest with yourself. Why are you asking this question? Is it that you're not attracted to your husband anymore, right? Because they're 40 pounds heavier than they were when you first got married. That's very real. And and that's the thing. Yeah. If you're not attracted to the person that you decide to spend the rest of your life with physically, that's fucking real. And anybody out there that says, well, that's just shallow. No. Well, you're not being real. Yes. Because we're just humans, right? And that's how this works. That's how nature works, period, end of story. Again, so I think that's the first thing you got to do is ask yourself the question, what are your concerns and what's bothering you? Because until you get clear with that, you are never going to be able to have that conversation that could then potentially motivate that spouse to do the things that I think you want them to do, which is take their health, fitness, their aesthetics, and their duties to you, the family, and all the people around you seriously, or at least reapproach them. So I think that's the first thing that somebody has to do to help with that motivation piece. And then secondly is sitting down and obviously having that very upfront conversation and being a person that can be supportive without enabling, because that conversation could get really rough. I mean, there could be very defensive coming from the other end. I've witnessed that with clients. I've heard clients stand in front of me, particularly women who are investing or taking time out of their day, who went a good part of their life with their kids going, I would never get a personal trainer. I would never do that. That would be so selfish of me to take that finance and that time and focus it on myself. But when I ask them, why are you here? It's because I don't feel good anymore. I don't feel like I can keep up with my kids. I'm worried about my health. I don't feel attractive for my husband. Like, there's all of these things. And again, husbands, maybe be thinking about what you're doing to give the wife the impression that you're not attracted to her anymore, whether you are or you aren't. Like, these are conversations that need to be had, but that have sat there and had these very real conversations with me. You hear shit as personal trainer or as a coach that sometimes you just prefer you hadn't heard. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is in having that conversation, being very real and not enabling and not stepping back and not feeling like you have to walk back from what your concerns are. Because if those are your concerns, they need to be addressed. And as long as they're rooted in love and, care, I think you're going to be okay. So it's more than just finding, and I think a lot of where this goes wrong is trying to find something that interests that spouse from like a physical activity perspective. And we're trying to kind of ease into it. I think that's the worst way to do this. I think it needs to be confronted head on. Yeah, I think it needs to be confronted head on. I think it needs to be very honest, very open. And I think, you need to set up the environment in a way that you're not going to be distracted. This is not a conversation you try to have in the front seat of the car on the road trip while the kids are sleeping in the back, or that it comes up, just kind of randomly or whatever. I think this is a thing where you set the stage, you set the table for, we need to have a very serious conversation. And I want to make sure there's free of distraction. It feels neutral. It feels as safe as we can, trying to create, I've used this term before, like create a container for this conversation to have, so that you're not having this conversation in another way where it's unclear and it feels like an attack, or that there's some other shoe that's going to drop. So as long as you're being honest with yourself, I think if you're setting it up right, you can be very helpful for that. But I'm going to talk to you about the man side of it for a second now. So I want to move away from kind of how to maybe do this and from the man side. No man enjoys being fat and lazy. And I'm not saying because you're overweight, 40 pounds overweight from when you got married, that he's lazy. But there is some sense of lack of prioritization that needs to happen there. And that could be some complacency, which I think leads to laziness. But as a dude, nobody enjoys feeling like that. We all have our insecurities. I've never met a dude that didn't want to look better naked, that didn't want to perform in the bedroom, that didn't want his family to be proud of him, that didn't want to walk into that business meeting and look like the dude that's 20 years younger than him, that works out every day and takes care of his business seemingly, walks up in front, because there's an immediate amount of respect that is gained when you walk into that room in business, in life, when you're in shape. You clearly have some control. You have some discipline. You have those things. Yeah, and I think there's not a dude out there that doesn't want that and hasn't felt that at some point. The other part is so don't just think that they've just given up and thrown up their hands. In a sense, they may have done this, but there's not a day that goes by, I guarantee you, in your husband's life where he's not putting on his underpants, just like anybody else in front of the mirror in the bathroom going, fuck. I guarantee it. I guarantee it. There may be some coping mechanisms and some things there to turn that off, but I guarantee you that is not the case. Like that's just not what's happening. The other part of this is I talked about at the beginning, like the things change in life, the priorities change in life, activities, liabilities, responsibilities, all those things change. He might have no idea how to get back to wherever he was because he never had to do much in the beginning to get there. And if he did, maybe it was minimal, maybe he'd have different, much of a plan. And he's afraid to get restarted again because he's not sure what the outcome is going to be. But what he's already pre-programmed in his head is that he's going to be a failure because he has let himself go this way. And then when he steps back into the gym or he steps back into this program, he's going to feel like shit. And that scares him. Like there's fear associated with this. And that also that if he shares that with people that he's going to do that, he will look like a failure to everybody else too. Because in his mind, the reality could be like, I'll never be where I was before again. So in that sense, I'm not going to ever approach this. And that's trying to create a safe container, which is a false sense of security. So I think I'm going on a little bit of a rant here, but this is a bigger problem than I think most people give it credit for. And we are constantly seeing every day that it's okay to be fat. It's okay to be overweight. We're normalizing this. And we've normalized it as a behavior, and it's not fucking okay.
Nope.
It didn't exist to this extent 50 years ago.
Didn't
exist.
Kids didn't have type 2 diabetes.
Our kids are suffering, men. Men, our kids are suffering, and you are responsible. You need to take responsibility for this. So for that spouse or that wife that might feel a little bit of this right now, like I'm feeling responsible, like I need to take more of a leadership role in my family here. Well, then fucking do it. That's your job. Take the leadership role and set this conversation up so that you can express your concerns in the most caring, loving way you can, but also in the most upfront way that a man needs to hear this. He needs to hear this. And as long as you're handling it that way, I think you'll probably have, you should be, it could get met with some resentment. And well, I guarantee you that I'll promise you, any resentment, any pushback that you feel is rooted in one emotion, and that is fear. It's fear of loss. It's also the recognition that you're right, right? And you're right because of your feelings, and that's the reality of it is like you're concerned, and that makes him afraid. Like he knows deep down, primevally, that he's done you wrong if you're afraid for his health, for his safety, for his personal appearance and all of those things. That's going to be a tough fucking pill to swallow. So it might be a very, very tough conversation to have, but it's a very real one. You have a responsibility to having with him, and he has a responsibility to be having with you and take action on. Last thing I'll add to this is once you get through that, I think being part of the process of finding the help that this person might need, that your husband might need in order to get there, not, oh, well, I know what it is. I'll go out and buy that brand new mountain bike that I wanted. That'll fix my problem. That would be signing off on some bullshit. Don't do that. Like, go through a process of finding some help to develop a plan before you start making larger investments and things like that. Because most dudes are like fixers. Like, they want to, like, here's the solution. I'll just go do this and this will fix my problem. I'll buy my fitness. You cannot fucking buy fitness. You cannot buy self-respect. You have to put in work, and they're going to need support, particularly when it gets tough. So that's my answer to that question.
And Red Dot Fitness does great initial we do free initial consults. So you guys want to come down and, have another person tell
whether
your
it's
husband.
in studio or online.
Yep, absolutely.
Next question. Will improving my flexibility help prevent injury? I'm reading mixed messages online. Some people say being too flexible causes weak joints, and others say mobility and flexibility help reduce injury. Love the show and would appreciate your perspective.
Okay.
Jeff.
Well, if you're hypermobile and you don't have control of your joints, you have a lot of laxity. We see this in a lot of women. Going into a squat without having a good stabilization and you're just wonky is bad. But when we talk about mobility training, it is literally strength training in its core. So you increasing your mobility is not going to hurt you when you're squatting or deadlifting. But if you are stretching passively all the time, and you're going into these exercises, stretching before, you can be weaker. You're increasing your flexibility and not increasing your motor control gap. And I'll go through this just real quick. Passive range, I lift my leg to my head with my hand. Passive. If I can lift it up all the way without a hand, that's active mobility. That is what we want. So any joint I have that I can't take through a full range of motion actively, that is where you're going to have the possibility for getting injured. So being sure that whatever you can take through passively needs to be backfilled with an active range of motion. Okay, just
in terms of adding on to that, Jeff, I thought you were gonna keep going with that, man. Like I was
I'm
all
sorry.
into
I just wanted everyone else to.
No, we enjoy your passion there, but my thing is like, so here's an example. We're talking about parenting and husband-wife relationships and things like that. A good way to look at this is, I think that the question was about the fear of like, when's enough versus too much, and I hear different things and these varying things out there. I think here's some things that you may be able to wrap your head around. So as you grow up, right, when you start as a kid, like as a baby, you're mobile as fuck, right, and flexible as fuck. The stuff little babies and little kids and toddlers can do is amazing, and then you start to see that change over time. Some of it is sort of there's some predispositions to some things, but it's largely due to the environment and the activities that we're involved in, right? And you'll start to see the kids as they get a little bit older, they get involved in activities, gymnastics, right? There's one where you have hypermobility, hyperflexibility is preferred, right? That we were able to do things with our bodies from a gymnastics perspective that gets us into positions and allows us to do some pretty amazing things. When you're young and pliable, if you will, before things have kind of set in for you, or you've casted, as I've heard Jeff say, in certain positions, sitting, or whatever. You've got this mobility. Now, gymnastics from one perspective, I think is great because I think it builds strength. Is you're building mobility as well as flexibility at the same time. The challenge with gymnastics is the overuse and obviously the acute injuries that come with some of the super dynamic stuff that they do. Dancing for the girls, and for the men as well. But I see the problems happen with adult females way more than they happen with adult males. The adult male stuff that comes from dancing, I think, comes from more of the acute stuff that happens, like in a fall or a slip or a bad landing or something like that, versus the cumulative trauma that I see happening with young females is that they turn into adults. They have hyper flexibility. They are very flexible. They can pull that leg up to their head with their hand, but they lack the strength or the mobility in that. And then they get into things as they get more advanced. They stick around long enough with their, they get into things like salsa dancing. This is a big one. I've never seen more fucked up, female, I'll just call them athletes, than dancers as they get older. That the cumulative trauma to their necks, their low back, and it's almost always 99% of the time because they're hyper flexible.
Yep.
They lack strength. They don't do strength training along the way. And so by the time they came to find me, and I've trained 50 of them over time, I got a lot of referrals at one point because our thing was strength building, and it was beyond the Pilates bed, right? That's only going to get you so far. That was more of a rehab tool to start with, and more than a performance tool. And they started to lift weights and start to help people. So the dangers of being hyper flexible are that you lack the support, the joint, the muscular support and tissue support to support your skeleton or your structure. And over time, what that can turn into is cumulative trauma, which cannot be reversed. You cannot change that. You have to manage around it. So that's a thing. I've not met anybody that worked too much on their mobility. Does that exist? I don't know. Have you ever met anybody that worked too much on being able to control a full range of motion actively? I've never met anybody.
Influencers trying to sell their program. That's it.
I've never met anybody that's too mobile. I've met people that are too flexible, right? To an extent.
Yeah, seeing good mobility is very rare. Very rare. And like you were talking about the yogis and dancers.
I didn't say yogis.
Well, I did. I'm throwing them in there. They have the most back pain that come to me. Like everyone that comes to me, dancer, yogi, for long periods of time, because they are passively holding these positions. It's not an active position.
Yeah, it depends on what yoga they're sort of practicing. I think those that dabble in different forms, like you'll start to see some different stuff. But yeah, if you're getting into again, yoga means different things to different people. I've said that all the time.
Absolutely.
But certain styles or practices of yoga do really, so what I'm looking for, emphasize what you're talking about, and it creates problems, particularly over time. With all the other great things it brings to the table, that is something that is a concern. So I couldn't agree with you more.
Next question. Is there unspoken gym etiquette that only gym owners, trainers, and gym regulars know about? Share the secrets. I just got a membership and want to be prepared.
Okay, awesome.
Unspoken etiquette.
Sounds great.
Well, we actually used to put it on the wall. Like if you go into big boxes, sometimes they actually still have the sign saying on the wall.
He said unspoken gym etiquette.
Yeah. So I get it. Sure. I'm just talking about like etiquette in general. Like what is proper gym etiquette? Like we used to put stuff on the walls, but you're saying is there unspoken stuff?
Don't use the hand dryers to fucking dry your balls.
Oh God.
I actually was at a gym where they had a sign that said that.
No, they have, so I don't know why they did this in gyms, but they have like a hand here and then they have a lower one that's literally at hip height. Oh. So it's like, for little kids? No, these guys have their balls in their hand just freaking going wild.
So I haven't heard about that, but I've heard about the blow dryers, like the hand blow dryers. They'll use it down there. Same with the women though.
Yeah, that doesn't just happen in the men's locker room. Yeah. It does not just happen in the men's locker room. But yeah, that's probably first and foremost anybody that's walked into a big box gym locker room and seen somebody blow drying their genitalia. That's we shouldn't have to, and it should be unspoken, but apparently we probably need to speak about it. Yeah.
I mean, gym, I mean, I don't know, unspoken versus spoken. I mean, I guess something that grinds my gears is when someone's trying to like build a fucking pyramid or something out of dumbbells where they have every dumbbell set from like 10 through 35.
Yeah, please don't do that.
You've cleaned out the entire rack of an entire range of weights because you're doing some type of pyramid, something. I don't know what the fuck you're doing.
Giant sets.
Yeah. And you have built a fort of dumbbells around you. And it's like, dude, there's other people here.
Yeah, I think this really boils down to a couple of things. And they're very simple as are most things in life. And we've overcomplicated it. But number one, we live in a society. We live in a society,
There
right?
are other people here.
There are other fucking people there, and you need to be socially aware. Like, and socially aware, you know, in the simplest terms, is treat other people the way you would want to be treated. Like, keep other people's potential things in mind. I'm not saying you have to prioritize it. Just keep it in mind. And like,
about being considerate.
you're talking about the same thing. Like, if just because, and look, I love a free society. It's America. Do whatever the fuck you want. But okay, you want to blow dry your balls at home? Go to town, man. Blow them all day long. Do what you want. But
get them crispy.
Yeah, do whatever you. Make sure they're dry.
Yeah,
He said blow them all day long.
Put some talcum on there. Just get wild.
But walking into the locker room where you've got other people, you know, in there, does that seem appropriate to you? If you do, then you're probably not socially aware. So I get it, but that's, you know, sometimes we need signs for things. We have to tell people things, you know, like pulling all the weights off the rack because you've got this pyramid set that you're doing or drop set or whatever. And did it ever occur to you that other people might want to use that one set of 50-pound dumbbells that we have in the gym that now you've had in front of you for 15 minutes or whatever? Yeah. It really is. So it's about social awareness. It's about treating people how you want to be treated. And just think 5 seconds ahead of what you're about to do, say, or whatever. So I don't think you could write all the things down, like in terms of what's unspoken. But as a gym owner and as a guy that's been around this for a very long time, who's worked in every conceivable environment there is in the fitness industry, and I mean that, like, and that's not me bragging about it. It's just like I know a thing or two because I've seen a thing or two, as the State Farm or whatever, you know, commercials say. Locker room antics, again, like, think about it if there was a child in there. Right? And what you would want them to see versus what you wouldn't want them to see. Now, I recognize that as a very fucking loaded statement right now, as sick as the people on this planet are about getting around things. But think about that for a second as let's just say, a civilized human being. If you wouldn't do that in front of the kid, then don't do it there. Out on the floor, if you were bringing your sister or your mom onto the floor or whatever, whatever, right? Your aunt a guest onto the floor. How would you want it to be perceived, and how would you want them to perceive the gym if you handled it that way? This is just being polite. Yeah. You know, I think there's a long list of things. Again, I've seen
my thing would be is if you're going to a gym, think of it as you being a guest in somebody else's place. So if you are a guest, pick up after yourself. Oh. If you are a guest, be socially aware as far as who's around you, and may you be in their way. See about sharing with somebody else. Yeah,
working in, things like that. Yeah, exactly. The $30 a month you pay for your gym membership entitles you to nothing. It entitles you to dick all. You get access to the same things that everybody else in here gets. You should get no special treatment. It doesn't allow you to be a dick. It doesn't allow you to accost people because you don't like the things that they're doing or saying in the gym. It doesn't give you a right to be a total asshole to the person standing behind the front desk or the membership manager or the personal trainer who you don't agree with their style or whatever else. You're entitled to nothing. And quite frankly, if business owners, and I am one of them, was a little bit better about not enabling people to use that excuse, it's like, why pay my membership here? So I, blah, 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 blah. I'm entitled to this. Yeah. You know what you hear around here? Get the fuck out of here. And I think if business owners had a little bit more balls, going back to the balls term, then you would have a little bit less of this question that this person has, because it would be the same as like you're walking into a fine restaurant. Would you act that way if you were walking into a 5-star restaurant where you're paying, $200 a plate, as you do when you walk into the gym, paying $30 a month? Like little things to think about. So I appreciate the question, but I mean, we go down a long list of things. Yes, clean up after yourself, right? Don't be a dick.
Don't babysit machines and
wipe up. If you're a sweater, wipe down your shit. When you're leaving it. If somebody's standing nearby, at least acknowledge them. Like maybe they want to work in. Hey,
are they looking at you?
Would you like to work in? Ask, be polite. Again, if it was your mom going in there, how would you want her to be treated on in her experience? That kind of thing. The locker room antics. I'm going to leave. I think we've covered that one to the extent we probably need to cover it, but think about those things. And again, a lot of this can be avoided, like the frustration, I think, for people, and maybe somebody that's doesn't want to embarrass themselves or doesn't want to do anything wrong. Go talk to the employees and the people in the gym that, when you buy your membership, and and have them walk you around and introduce you to some people or whatever and see what kind of a vibe you get. Because if you get a funky fucking vibe,
take your money elsewhere.
Take your money elsewhere. It's America. There are plenty of people out there that will take your money and will respect that. And regardless of what you're paying, whatever they've decided their value is, they will provide that value for you. So, and respect you, I think. So, yeah.
So I like that, because the biggest thing you guys kept coming back to was self-awareness, like being aware.
Yeah.
Like, just because you have your fucking iPhone out and you're videotaping your deadlift does not mean that people walk in front of that camera and that you have that whole space. Go fuck off.
Yeah.
No one get, like, dude, seriously.
So for that person that asked the question, like, what don't you do wrong? Like, or, what do I have to do to avoid doing anything wrong or looking like an idiot? Look, the whole camera thing, I get it. It's a thing now. We were on a road trip a little while ago, and I hadn't been in a big box in quite some time. I almost figured it was about a year at least since I was in there working out. And I was looking around, just going, God dang, nothing changes, man. It's the same, except for the phones. I mean, the phones are everywhere, and everybody's either on them, right? Texting or watching YouTube videos, or maybe they're dialing up a new song on YouTube or whatever, however people are consuming their music these days, or they're filming their shit. So that's one of those things, like, leave the fucking phone alone. Like, that's a big one for me, but apparently that's becoming more acceptable and a thing. But yeah, don't be surprised if you're filming something and
someone doesn't want to be filmed.
Somebody steps in front of it and what you're seeing is, somebody's back for
you're in my shot.
Just be self-aware. Just be self-aware and care about the other people around you in the gym, and you'll be fine. And put your shit back. Yeah. Stay clean. You're going to be good.
Yeah, I agree 100%.
Next question. I found Red Dot through the Whole Foods clip and have been following everyone on the team. My question is, what do Steven's workouts look like for endurance racing and training for ultras?
Fuck yeah. I guess this is a question for me, huh? But
can you repeat the question?
You repeat the, it was a tragedy.
What's endurance?
Well, I mean, they could look like a lot of different things. It depends on what type of distance I'm preparing for. But I guess to kind of speak on it generally, what I've been doing recently has been RDF strong. So I alternate between strength training and running. So I strength train one day, I run the next day, I strength train the next day, I run the next day, 5 to 6 days a week. That might shift depending on, again, the length of a race that I'm preparing for. Something like a half marathon, I don't need to put in as much volume ahead of time. But if we're actually getting towards an ultra marathon, and there could be different distances of an ultra marathon, my running volume may need to increase. So I may have to skew more towards running. And what the running workouts look like, that could really depend. There's tempo runs where you're coming in, a little bit of a faster pace. Sometimes there's just like time volume runs where I'm really not as concerned with my pace, or I'm actually intentionally trying to go slow. There's a premise of run slow to go fast.
Yep.
Yeah, for sure.
So there are some, again, there can be different variables here, but it might, there might be a workout where I'm a little more focused on speed, and then there might be a workout where I'm a little more focused on just time on my feet. That could be either just running, on mostly flat ground, or if I'm in, out on a trail, different elevation, different terrains, things like that. So that can all vary. But I think maybe the important thing to keep in mind is that I always come back to strength training, because that is kind of the foundation of me preventing injury. And there's also something to be said about in what I do trail running versus like marathon running. It's a little different style. It's not a pure
like a flat course versus
So there's if you're climbing, you're going on variable terrain. I'm more concerned with the stability in my hips, my knees, my ankles. I would say, the power in my quads and my hamstrings and my glutes is maybe a little more important than someone who's doing the Boston Marathon or something like that, who is built like a greyhound and much faster than me. But that's because it's a different style of race.
1000%.
I'm a little more concerned about my upper body strength because of the type of running that I'm doing as well. Although you should be in general, because there is a benefit to having a stronger posture in your running gait. You become more efficient. I'm not a fan of having the runner chicken chest, where you have like just no upper body muscle volume, because I think that helps me again have a stronger arm swing, have stronger posture, be more efficient, and actually improve my endurance and my stamina. I think if you're not strength training, you're going to break down faster.
Oh yeah.
So I don't know if that answers the question. But
Man,
there's too many variables.
No, I thought you did an excellent job,
Yeah.
given what you just said. The last statement there's so many variables to get to consider, and I don't know that people do that when they think about running a lot, and the types of distances that you might be running. I think are probably the first thing people comes to mind. Is it a 5K? Is it 10K? Is it a half marathon, ultra? But there's so many other factors that go into this, right? Like, does this happen? What climate does this happen in? What does the terrain look like? Is this a flat road course? Is it a flat trail course? Does it have hills in it? Do we have up? Do we have down? Is there twists and turns?
Yeah, switchbacks,
Yeah,
things like that.
all of those kinds of things. Or is there sand involved? Is it sandy soil? Is it clay soil? Is it rocky soil? Did it just rain? Is it dry? Is it summer? Is it winter? All of these things are going to play a factor in terms of how you train. But I love how you keyed into the strength training piece.
Yes.
Personal example, this was not for me, but I used to, for a while, 10 years of my life, I got real heavy into triathlon, right? And I excelled at the off-road stuff. And you were talking about like the power to weight ratio, making sure you have enough upper body strength, you have power in your extensors and your flexors, and sort of coming down hills, going up hills, staying stable and things like that. Man, when I get out there on those road courses, I could hang on the bike. Nobody passed me on the bike. But I just did not have the speed, like you mentioned, like the greyhounds, in the water or on my feet, on these flatter courses. I was just not going to be competitive. Now I could compete with myself, and I wasn't out there necessarily to win, but I did get frustrated and kind of watching this happen. But then I got into the mountains, we got off road, and it was vastly different because these gazelles or greyhounds that could have crushed me, on these flat courses, I was crushing them. And it was kind of a battle of attrition, the uphill and the downhill. I had, they may have had like this very lightweight power to weight ratio where as long as it stayed fairly consistent, they could stay like at their 80% the entire time. But if it went like you're almost at 100, now you're down to 60, now you have to manage. You can't stay at your 80 because of the terrain changes and whatever else. This is where I think the more muscular, more powerful, more athletic runner or competitor is going to excel. And so again, just wrapping that up, Steven's question for him, is I love how you brought it back to strength, because when people say, hey, I'm thinking about training for a marathon, or I'm thinking about training for a triathlon or either a 5K, my first question always to them is like, cool, what's your strength training program look like?
Like what?
Yeah, and that blows people's minds.
I just like ran hella.
It's running.
More mileage.
Yeah.
Well,
Nope.
Yeah, great fucking answer, man.
Yeah.
Next question. I often feel overwhelmed by the abundance of conflicting fitness information available. How should I qualify influencers and find reliable sources of advice to guide my fitness journey?
Okay. Well, do they have a doctorate by their name? Are they just some fucking girl that says, hey, this is how I got my big ass?
Just because they have a doctorate by their name doesn't necessarily mean
Not at all. But I mean,
that
if you
they're the
just follow
qualified
people,
individual.
Not at all. But you follow people like Lane Norton.
Okay. If they're specific to
but that's what I'm saying.
A certain topic.
They're gonna come out. It's all about big bodies of science. Okay.
Big bodies of science.
Yes, bodies of fucking science. Evidence. Granular big. Okay, not granular big. All right, but I mean, like, why are you trying to get something from Instagram? There are literal people that have been doing this for years. You can go on YouTube. You can find all the strength coaches. That nothing has changed. So go on YouTube. You can find reputable people. I'm just going to go down a negative rant. Scott, what do you think about that?
So, I mean, I think you can use Instagram as a tool to maybe help you find reputable people.
To source them.
Yeah, to source them,
but you have to know. You have to be in the know, because all of these people are using gimmicky words, and people are like, well, I'm getting confused because of all of this.
Yes, but then you have to do your research on who you're coming across. right?
So people have to do work, Cece.
I know.
Oh,
That's what I'm
God,
trying
here
to
we
get
go.
at. So, yeah, I think you can use Instagram as a resource. Don't use Instagram as that's your information source as far as this is the end all be all. But the other thing is too, just because they have a PhD, and I have a PhD, but just because they have a PhD next to their name doesn't necessarily mean that they know shit about the content that they're putting out.
Amen.
That is true.
So.
Yeah. And it could depend on the topic that they're talking about. They might have, their field of study.
PhD is pilot higher and deeper. So, just saying.
I thought it was pretty huge.
No.
discrepancy in their knowledge. But, I think maybe this person is looking for, maybe some practical,
let's handle that.
Steven,
you and I, we should handle this part.
Some practical principles in terms of what to look for. I mean, I guess maybe it kind of depends on the topic that they're talking about. It kind of depends on what they're purporting to be an expert in, and do they actually have some type of higher education or some type of background in that field. For example, just because this comes up, you mentioned Lane Norton. Anyone who's familiar with Lane Norton knows his arch nemesis is Paul Saladino, the carnivore MD. Very entertaining, him ranting about Paul Saladino. But Paul Saladino is an MD, but in psychiatry. But he's talking about nutrition. So that type of thing. So it's you mentioned just because they have some letters next to their name. Well, what field did they get their letters in, and what field are they actually talking about?
Yep.
So.
Man, I have so many things to say about this. I have my views on the institution of education, and they are supported with, the values that exist there in going through the institution of education. Because there's a lot of reps that end up happening. You learn a lot about things like how to research and, where the science comes from and how to kind of deal and I guess sift through things. So we started this out with, what's the acronym behind their name? I think that is a valid point. I think you can have a look at that and just say, okay, what's the level of education that the person has gone through in order to get that, to be sort of qualified to be talking about, to your point, Stephen, whatever the subject matter happens to be. Are they staying within their lane, sort of, so to speak? Or, if it seems like they're out of their lane, well, what qualifies them to be outside of their lane? Because there could be other things there. Career paths. There's research that happens for PhDs, and then there's people that are in practice, right? And there's a very, very different things. And while the knowledge crosses over, what you're actually getting from those things as the person involved could be very, very, or vastly different. So I'm going to take it kind of another step back and go to your points, guys, with regard to like, why am I looking on Instagram for my, all this information? I literally just did a post on this morning, and that was, basically like, don't tell me you researched it, because you didn't fucking research it, right? Like, you saw some things, you heard some things, and then you maybe went out and had, tried to find a confirmation bias through listening to somebody else who's kind of saying the same things, or is basically validating your belief system based on what you've heard or seen through reading a quick article or listening to an influencer's talk, or whatever the case is. Even as compelling as that influencer may have been, right, with their grease board or their graphics or how they're, they've edited their video down, you're confirming what you're again, there's a confirmation bias there. You're trying to confirm what you think you already know or what should be correct. To your point, Cece, I think social media is a powerful tool, and it is a really great place to start to gather information and listen to those people. And I'll talk about the gathering piece in a second, but once you've sort of gathered something, you may think you have this, okay, this should be right, or this sounds right, conventional wisdom says, kind of whatever else, to dig a little deeper. Okay, so now you take what you have and you dig deeper. And that might be going to other influencers, and then dig past the 30-second video or the 15-second clip or, whatever, to, again, research, like, where's this person coming from?
Corroborate the,
So then, and ways to do that practically would be like, get into the comments section a little bit, right? And see who's commenting and how they're commenting. I know this can be a slippery slope, but, sometimes you'll get into these things and it's just nothing but ridiculousness, right? That might tell you something, right? If it's nothing but ridiculousness and people are just being uber negative or, condescending or whatever else, I think a lot of times that does speak to the nature of whatever has been presented. And again, while my faith in humanity is often challenged, particularly on the internet, I think there may be some validity in like, look, you got a bunch of people on here saying this dude's a total, pompous ass and he's ridiculous, and that's not rooted in. There may be some truth in that. I think if you accept that 50% of it could be true, you have to, with regard to it being right, you also have to accept that 50% of this could be total bullshit. And so you have a responsibility to yourself to dig a little deeper. So look at who's commenting and how they're commenting. A lot of times the people, like you guys have dropped some names here, will be supported by other people that have spent a lot of time in that field of whatever it is that they're talking about, and they will comment. Look to see what that comment is, how it's being challenged, right? Click on that person's page, right? And see what they're putting out and how they're doing it and what they're saying. Does this line up? Does this feel, does it look like a duck? Does it smell like a duck? Does it talk like a duck? That kind of thing. Because I think you can gather a lot from that, that social media, again, influencer. Next steps are going to be to dig much deeper than that. And, Google can be a really awful, awful place, but it is a good place to, again, start to gather some more information, read some articles, see what's been referenced, like what is the study that this person is referencing, and look out there. And I realize at this point, it can get very, very confusing. But when you do find somebody that you think could be right, or, and you have more questions about that and you're just trying to confirm, you should not hesitate to reach out to them and other people about whatever it is that they're doing and how they're doing it. Because the good ones in the business will refer you to the right places. They will be happy to answer questions when they can and how they can, as so long as the question is formulated from an informed position. Not some random shit that they answer all the time, right? Do some research. Like I said, look through that feed. Your question that you have may have been answered, right? They may have a highlight, reel at the top, of their feed where they answer commonly asked questions or whatever. Like, go through there, because if you're asking the same question that everybody asks all the time, it's likely that they have something out there that puts that information out. Check the link in the fucking bio. If they say link is in the bio, go to the link in the bio and do some work. Don't say, hey, where's this referenced from? Like, I want to see the references. Well, oftentimes the good ones, they will supply the references and they're giving you a link. Instagram, for example, is very limited that way. Like, you have to go to the link in order to get the link, right? So do your research, spend some time in there in doing that, so that you're gathering information very quickly. I think if you put that time in, and less time just scrolling and more time digging into one specific thing on one specific person on one specific topic, you will end up learning quite a bit about all of those things very quickly. And you might get turned on, to some other people that do a really good job doing very similar things in a really good way.
That's a great way to...
happy to be a resource wherever we can. I don't know everybody. I don't know everything, but we do follow a lot of people. We talk to a lot of people. We're not afraid to reach out and talk with folks. So if you're like, hey, I'm looking for a very, very specific answer to this very, very specific question, again, spend some time formulating that question, understanding the platform that you're using to ask it, right? Send it away and we will get back to you. We'll hey, maybe go listen to this guy's stuff on this particular thing because he's really good at this, or, her take on this we think is really good simplification of a very complex or complicated topic or whatever else. I mean, I think that's what people probably want to know.
Because navigating that is extremely hard.
It can be very tough.
Especially if you don't have the base foundation for what's going on and just all these things are coming at you. You want to grab all of them, right?
Yeah, give yourself some credit too. I think, again, my faith in humanity is often challenged, but, use your sniffer. Use your sniffer. If it looks like a duck, talks like a duck, walks like a duck, maybe it is. But at the same time, like, what is the bullshit factor that could be here? Because if it all sounds good, but they're standing there with their shirt off and, they're flashing some product in your face, red flag, right? You might want to ask a few more questions. If they're talking shit about somebody else constantly, red flag, right? If they have to disparage somebody else. Now, again, there are some people that are making a very good case for making other people look silly because of the bullshit that they're putting out there. There's not a lot of people that do that well. What I mean by that is going, okay, look at this jackass. Look at the things that he's saying and how he's influencing people. I'm not going to stand for this. I'm going to call him on his shit.
This is the science.
This is it. There are a couple of people that are doing that, but that is not a common thing that's not common. And
most people don't do it well.
That's right. They don't know how because they don't know what they're talking about. They're way out of their lane. Going back to that guy's name, he does a really good job, I think, of presenting his information. Love him or hate him.
Yeah.
Love him or hate him, the stuff he's bringing to the table, I think is pretty good as an example. Versus you look at like, Huberman or whatever, who talks about it without talking about it.
Yeah.
So that's a different approach.
Yes.
So whatever your flavor is, again, use that sniffer and think about it. Yeah.
Next question. Does it matter if I take a protein shake 2 hours after a workout, or do I have to do it within a specific time window after my workout?
Yeah, the old anabolic window. So this goes back to another question we answered earlier, is like, why does it seem like people are saying the same stuff they were saying a year ago? The fact that this is still being asked is an interesting one because it's been talked about so much, this anabolic window of protein intake.
The other day too.
Yeah.
It's horseshit.
I mean,
for most people, it doesn't matter. If you get your total protein at the end of the day, you're good. Now, for people that are athletes or really need to recover, or they're going to have another training session later, carbs and protein shake within that window just for recovery, not for, there's an anabolic, addition to this.
Going catabolic.
Exactly. No, that doesn't happen. It takes a long time to get into that catabolic, especially if you have protein that day and you're eating.
Yeah. I think the question is always, that's a depends question. And it starts with like, where did you come into the workout with, and what's your plan for the remainder of the day and week, and how does this fit into the bigger picture? But to simply ask, like, I do a workout, and if I don't get my protein bolus of 40 grams of protein in the form of whey protein and concentrated amino acids, essential amino acids, am I missing something, or am I going to lose my gains?
Your workout is wasted.
Am I going to
should actually never work out?
Is it worthless? Yeah. The answer to that question is no. There's a case to be made for that person that is on maybe calorie restriction, or maybe that person is on a very, very specific performance training plan where they have maybe multiple, training sessions during a day. And again, they're really having a tough time getting in the calories. And maybe, again, that's very restricted depending on what they're trying to do, where it's not about the anabolic, this theory of anabolic window. It's just more about getting it in there so that you have that protein in you throughout the day to go through the recovery process. It's got to be metabolized. It's got to so that you can begin to recover and utilize the protein for the purposes of, getting that protein in the first place. Yeah. So I think that's the way to look at it. I don't know, Steven, if there's anything you want to add to this.
No, I think you guys pretty much covered it. That's kind of like an age-old concern. Like, if I don't consume protein and carbs within 45 minutes, was my workout useless? Yeah. Am I gonna shrink? Am I wasting away? Yeah, it depends. And maybe it's a better idea for you if you go into your workout fasted. And now you're 4 or 5 hours into your day, and you're going to be playing catch up the rest of the day. If you wait, then maybe you do need to consume some nutrients within 45 minutes after your workout. But I think it does boil down to ultimately what your total daily intake is and how you're spacing that out, and that can depend person to person. But you're not going to supercharge your gains because it's been 12 minutes since my workout, like I need to slam this protein, pound it. Like, no, it's
I come at this from always I go like, where do these questions come from? Like, or where does the I don't want to call it a myth, but where does this come from? Where does this idea come from? And they generally almost always comes from the bodybuilding world. So I'm just going to say this: when the depends answer is it's fucking important. When you're injecting insulin, anabolics, growth hormone, and peptides,
you're going to literally pass out.
Then it's very important that you get that protein in there at that particular time in order to maximize the transportation and the uptake, transportation, utilization of that stuff on top of the cocktail beyond the protein that you're already taking. And again, a lot of this shit comes from that world, and that's probably where it came from. So if you're just a person trying to be a little healthier, put on a little muscle, lose a little fat, and just be generally healthier, and that's not you, it's not a thing.
Don't worry about it.
Last question. After decades of working in the fitness industry, what is one thing each of you had to learn the hard way about health and fitness?
One thing we had to learn.
More is not always better.
Yeah, that's true.
So for instance, if I wanted to start building my quads and I got a full workout, something else is going to have to take a back seat, right? You just can't add on load. Now, if you do, and you increase your nutrition and you're aware of that, then that's fine. You're hitting recovery. But if you're just adding on things because, I need to build my hamstrings, and now you're 15 sets over what you've normally been doing, well, that's not going to be good, right? So just for me, more is less. Or sorry.
More is better.
More is better.
I mean, less is more. Less is more.
But that being the problem, like more is not necessarily better.
More is
that was the lesson that you learned.
Sorry, more is not better. Necessarily better. Thank you.
Give me a second.
I would say
you haven't learned it yet.
A good one.
Yeah, maybe not.
That's a hard one to answer. I think less is more. Yes. The other thing is to have a good workout. You don't have to be sore to have a good workout. And the other thing is, something that we've talked about on the show is finding that threshold as far as the minimal dose to be able to recover and then achieve more gains. So that one I think was a really big challenge for me to overcome, because I always thought when I was younger, I had to be sore, I had to do more. And the more sore I was, then the better gains. But that's so not true.
Yep.
Yeah, there's understanding that and then actually being able to apply that. There's some science behind that comes with awareness. But there's an art to programming
Absolutely.
that too. Yeah, and that comes through the reps and the experience of the different people. I think it's an interesting one.
I mean, I guess just that everyone's experience, at least in my area, everyone's experience is different, and you're not going to be able to communicate the same way to everyone. There's not one right way, or there's not one right plan. You're going to have to feel your way through, different individuals who have different scenarios.
And that's why coaching is an art over time. Not everyone can just because you got fit, you can't train people. Like he's talking about, you need to know every individual and be like, okay, this person needs this at this time. And that comes with being around and putting in the reps.
Yeah. Comes with not knowing what to do and getting stuck.
Yes.
Yeah, Steven just stole my thunder there. So, but I'm not going to let you do that. So, but I'm also not going to change my mind.
I got a little lightning over here.
I think fuck you, thunder. The biggest thing for me was like, didn't matter how much I knew, right? And how hard I studied or how hard I worked or what results I got as a trainer or as a, personally from a fitness perspective, what classes I went to, what certifications I got. The hardest lesson, I think, or the most important, I don't think it was the hardest lesson. It was just the most important lesson I got was that communication trumps all of that. Because I don't care how much you have in your head or what you know, or even how much you care. If you cannot communicate this effectively to the person that's standing in front of you that needs and wants the help, you will not be able to help them. And what that translates into is them not getting what they want, you being ultimately frustrated as well. And it's just not a good situation. So like the learning how to question skillfully and listen carefully, and then take that knowledge that you've had and that practice that you've had and be able to package it in a way that this person can understand in their own way based on their experiences, to your point, Stephen, and what it is that they're trying to do is the most important lesson I think you will ever learn as a coach. In the fitness industry is a wild place. And I think if people did a better job of communicating, just in general, I think it wouldn't be the wild, wild west that it is. It's a double-edged sword, in terms of this communication process, because people are really good at communicating stuff and they make it sound really sexy and it sounds very right? It's like, oh my God, like this, of course, this conventional wisdom says that this eat less, lose weight, that as a simple one. But, when you tell people that, what do they hear? Right. And how are they receiving that? So yeah, man, Stephen, we're on the same page, man. That communication process is just critical.
It's empathy.
Yeah, at the end of the day. Yeah, it is. It's really understanding what somebody's going through. And again, if you're not asking those questions, you could give somebody, a plan. Go back to like
anybody can give anybody a plan. Right?
Yeah, a monkey can do that now. Literally, like get on the Google, get a meal plan. what is that person really learning from that, and how are they going to apply that down? How are you empowering them to do this on their own longer term? That starts with this communication process.
Because education drives compliance.
Yeah, there's a bit of that. It does. A lot of times it can, but if you can't, if you can't make a connection with them and communicate so that they're educated in a way that they can, so that they can be educated, right? Yeah, you're fighting an uphill battle, which ends up in like frustration. We've talked about it on the show before, like just that frustration of like, I'm not getting through, you're not giving me anything back. That there's responsibility on both parties there, but you know, as a guy that's been in the fitness industry for longer than I like to admit, you know, over 25 years now, from a leadership perspective, from a coaching perspective, from a business to business, business to client, you know, kind of perspective, like those comm skills, yeah, they are very, very critical, I would say, outside of obviously having that underbelly of knowledge that you got to have, even if it's not that deep. Communication is the biggest key.